Good afternoon and welcome to Miss Don's Justice. I'm so glad to be here with you again, and with me is my good friend Gwen Lewis Esquire. We're here today on a sad note. At the beginning of the program, we want to note that in the District of Columbia, we continue to experience senseless violence, particularly violence concerning children. This past week, we had a 13-year-old young man shot on Saturday. It occurred at 4 a.m. on Saturday morning. He was shot by an adult who is yet, I think, unidentified, except to the extent we know he's a DC government worker. There's some question about the circumstances. We don't know all those circumstances yet. It was a tragedy. 13 years old, gone via gun shot. We don't know all of the details, so let's not jump to conclusions and let's not spread misinformation. Yesterday, during rush hour, two young children getting off of a metro bus shot, and an adult also shot. Uh, none of them were the intended targets. Can you imagine that? Two children getting home from school shot in Upper Northwest, Brightwood, again in Brightwood, Ward 4, where people think this does not happen. Okay? Now, the young man who was shot a Saturday, that happened in Ward 5, the Turkey Thicket area, well, Quincy and 10, the 1000 block of Quincy Street Northeast. And so today, we want to talk about
Excuse me.
today we want to talk about thou shalt not kill. This past week, the Anacostia Coordinating Council and other leaders in Southeast launched a campaign concerning this obvious reference to or quote from the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. Now, you'll see these signs, these red and white signs. It should be on our screen now. You should see it all over the city very soon, not just in Anacostia. We are under siege all across 8 wards in this city. No one is immune from this violence. We want to make that clear. So let us not make this a Southeast thing or a Lower Northwest thing. This is a District of Columbia-wide issue. In fact, it's more than that. It's a DMV issue because violence has touched on Virginia and Maryland. So it's a DMV issue. We focus on the district because that's where we live. Now, thou shalt not kill. It's not enough just to have a saying or a slogan. What we also have, and what the East of the River clergy and the faith community came up with, led by Wanda Thompson and other clergy, we came up with a code of conduct, that is based on some old-fashioned values and morals, okay? And I urge you to, it should be up on the screen now, the code of conduct, okay? The community code of conduct. People, it takes all of us to work together to change what's going on. Just legislation does not work. This calls for community involvement and commitment. We got to know better to do better. We do know better, so we have to do better, all right? And that starts right in our family unit, and in our community unit. This community code, look at it, it's on the screen. It's divided into 3 sections. It begins by saying, I am a crucial part of my community and I recognize and respect my own self-worth. And that means, as a faithful member of my community, I do certain things. As a responsible and accountable there's that word, accountable person in my community, I do certain things. As a respectful steward of my community, I do certain things. It's red section, black section, and green section. Look, we must take accountability for some of what's going on in our community. We cannot just be in a victim mode, a victim mentality mode. We must be activists in our own community. How are we raising our children? Are we looking to the community to help raise the children? We'll say things like it takes a village to raise a child, but then when someone in the village attempts to correct your child, you're angry. Come on, let's go back to the way we used to do things. You know how we used to do things together in our community. And as a faithful member of my community, I respect that some believe that there is a positive, creative power of force higher than us, and some do not believe, and it's okay. I choose to be a person of integrity and do not act out of jealousy, greed, or revenge. I help others in my community. As a responsible and accountable person in my community, I build up my community. I do not tear it down. I listen to and look out for our youth, seniors, parents, family, and neighbors. I appreciate diversity and value positive cultural traditions in my community. I honor the positive contributions of my ancestors and elders in my community, to my community, city, and nation. I do not commit violence because it kills my community. I do not commit violence because it kills my community. As a respectful steward of my community, I value lifelong learning and I help bring about positive change. I learn about and work for my rights and those of my community. I support empowering enterprises in my community. I work hard to better the conditions of my community for the next generation. I keep it clean and beautiful. All right, that's the community code, and that's a powerful code, and it fits right in with thou shalt not kill. And while we think of the commandment, thou shalt not kill, as the killing of the physical body, what we're experiencing, I think this is just Dawn talking, is a spiritual death. You know, there's something that ends up in the physical killing. You know, there's the death of dreams. I was thinking of Langston Hughes, the dream deferred, you know, killing the spirit, killing dreams, killing. And when people feel hopeless, do they feel that there's nothing else to do? I mean, what?
And that hopelessness can start at a very early age.
Right.
So we've got to really stay with the idea that we have to put something into our children in order to get something positive out. We see, parents going up the street and the children are walking along and the parent is on the cell phone, not engaging the children at all.
Right.
Or they're in the restaurant and everybody's got food, but the parent is on the cell phone,
Right.
not engaging the children at all.
Right.
So there's so many opportunities to make a difference in a child's life just with words, just with talking, and keeping them engaged.
Well, and when you said starts at an early age, this past week, in the last, it's happening so fast, Gwen, I can't keep up. But there was a 6-year-old who shot his school teacher. Now,
Yes.
obviously, this was a well thought out.
Apparently so.
Yeah. Yeah, it was in his backpack, and he took it to a school, an elementary school, and evidently maybe they didn't have the metal detectors in the school. I'm not sure. It was in Newport News, Virginia. That's the Tidewater area. And he shot his teacher, 6 years old. Now, the law is such that they can't detain him in a regular juvenile facility. And of course, he's way too young to be tried as an adult. So now this is a special circumstance for which there's really no strict guideline, except he could be put in foster care or some kind of therapeutic setting. But 6 years old, and I don't know if you've ever fired a gun, but it takes a little
Yes.
effort to fire a gun. And he was 6 years old. He knew where a gun was, obviously. He knew how to pack it away, and he knew how to take it out and discharge it. So, I mean, 6 years old, you should be playing games, doing first grade things. I forgot what those are exactly. But, I know in first grade, I wasn't taking a gun to school and shooting my teacher. That I know. So this is really weighed heavy on me, and all of us.
It should disturb everybody.
It should.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, it shouldn't be just us.
Right.
And look, here's another thing. You need not be a parent or grandparent to be concerned. Just part of the community. I always say this. I know people get tired of me saying it. The children belong to all of us. Don't say you don't have children in school. We all have children in school. All right? The school system is something we all support, indirectly or directly. If you're a taxpayer, you support the school system, right?
That's right.
And if you want to look at it in these terms, the children in those schools will soon be out here taking care of our institutions. So we're all vested in a positive outcome in the
That's true.
schools, right?
Without that outcome, we have the smashing of the car windows that seems to have broken out over the past couple of days. All the things that happened in my neighborhood last night, 2 people shot.
In our neighborhood.
Yeah, our neighborhood.
In our neighborhood, 2 people shot last night. Was at South Capitol
South
in
Capitol
Atlantic.
Street.
Yeah. So, but the other
They
things
were
that
all
happened.
children
Yeah.
at some point.
Oh, yeah. So, what happened? Not what's wrong with you, what happened to you. That's what trauma-informed care specialists say. The real question is, what happened to you? And I'm so concerned about us becoming numb, the children becoming numb to seeing this. Now, fortunately, I did see that one of our schools decided to close for a couple of days to help children deal with the trauma. And that's good, because to make them go right back to school or stay in the school while something horrible goes on just contributes to already traumatized children and the adults. Now, that teacher who was shot by a 6-year-old will never be the same, people. And what did she ask when as soon as they were able to, attend to her and treat? How are my kids? Still, that was her focus, the status of her children. How were they doing? And so, no. And here's another thing. Now, where the young man was shot, the 13-year-old, the Turkey Thicket Recreation Center was packed and jammed. Okay? But when are we going to pack and jam the rec centers and the PTA meetings to demand better schools? When are we going? Why does it always take
A tragedy.
a tragedy? I'm just asking the question. Why does it take a tragedy for us to pack a room and be, and it was a very heated place. Why can't we do that same packing and jamming a room to demand better schools and better recreation services? It was in a rec center. Ward 5, it was in a middle-class area, Ward 5. Okay? So I'm just saying, we need to do better. We know better. Now let's do better. Okay? Thou shalt not kill. It's not just physical killing. I'm a person of faith, you're a person of faith. And when I was reading the code of conduct and talking about building up our communities, I'm thinking of something that happens in our community that's really very sad, and that's tearing each other down through gossip and very cruel conversation. Okay. Now, the Bible is clear. It says death and life is in the power of what?
The tongue.
The tongue. James said it's little, but oh, it's full of poison. And we set forth that poison in our community with our conversation and tearing our community down. We tear each other down, and that tears our communities down. And we were created by the word. If you're a person of faith, the word is said, and let there be, and let there be. And now we need to say, now let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Okay. Well, today we have some interesting topics, people. So tune in, call your friends, and say, Miss Dawn and Miss Gwen getting ready to start some good trouble. The first thing we're going to talk about is prenuptial agreements. Prenuptial agreements. Now, I know typically when you hear this term, you think of movie stars, don't you? And rap stars, celebrities. You think of celebrities. You say, well, I don't need a prenup agreement because I'm not rich. I don't need that. Well, guess what? Here's my saying. Prenuptial agreements are not for rich people. They're for smart people. Okay? Did you know that we now get married at later age? Back when I came out of high school, people did get married right out of high school or shortly after that. But now the age for first marriages is close to 30 years old. Okay, so here we are, almost 30. Most of us have been out of high school for 12 years, out of college for 8 years, something like that. And so in that time, we have worked and accumulated some things. So, Ms. Gwen Lewis Esquire, why do we think about having prenuptial agreements? First, tell people what it is.
It's a prenuptial agreement is a legal contract between a couple before they get married. It sometimes addresses such things as separation of the assets, spousal support, and any responsibility that the person will have for the other person's debt should the marriage dissolve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not only by a divorce. Marriage could result in one of the spouses dying. And that, in that context, a prenuptial agreement will also be important.
Well, it could be for first-time marriage people. And how about if it's not my first rodeo?
Then it's really, really important, because that person that you were wrangling with in the first marriage, you want to make sure everything is clearly delineated, that that's over.
Yeah.
And
over.
New sheriff in town.
Yeah, new sheriff in town. There you go. Okay, we like to have a little fun with this, people, but we're talking about something that is very, very serious. So, we can have, remember, what was that show? Oh, was it in the 80s? The Brady Bunch?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the blended families.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that? Okay, folks, listen to Miss Dawn. Look closely. The Brady Bunch was a sitcom. Okay? Listen to what we're going to tell you about prenuptial agreements. Okay. Now, I never said anything in the Brady Bunch that I recall about them having a prenup. It was a sitcom. Okay. There you go. Go ahead, Ms.
So the last thing you want to have happen to you in your marriage is that something happens to your partner, either through, death or divorce, and you're saddled with that partner's debt.
Hmm.
And that can happen in the absence of a prenuptial agreement.
Now, in that prenup agreement, what are some of the sections, the specific sections in that prenuptial agreement that are so important?
Not sure where you're going with that.
Well, of course, you identify the parties
Oh, absolutely.
and that kind of thing. But in that, what kind of wording or what's important in terms of property?
Who the owner is of the property is very important. Suppose one partner already owned the home, and that partner wants to leave the home to his or her children.
Mhm.
In the absence of a prenuptial agreement, the law in place in your jurisdiction might state that the spouse or surviving spouse gets half of everything.
That's true.
So in the absence of some agreement contrary to that, then the intended beneficiaries would not have any recourse.
Right. And here's where we get into the importance of having a will and the importance of having a prenuptial agreement. And so that prenup, as we call it, that's short. The prenup should say that it's the intention of the parties to override the estate law of a particular jurisdiction, which brings me to another situation here. The prenuptial agreement must state the law under which it is written and under which it will be enforced. Okay, so if we're in the District of Columbia, we want it to be governed by the laws of the district. If you're in Maryland, Virginia, whatever state you're in, or that you decide that you want it to be governed by a state. Let's say the couple has more than one home, and some people do have a vacation home and so forth. We need to identify the governing jurisdiction, okay? And as you said, you have to account for what you want to happen with the children with respect to what you keep separate. Now, that gets into an area of separate property. And separate property is usually property we bring into the marriage that we owned prior to the marriage, and even after the marriage, what we inherit. It's
That's
considered separate property. Now, later down the road, we're going to talk about be careful not to convert your separate property into
joint property
or marital property.
Yeah.
And it can be done like by doing really careless things, okay? Like you refinance that separate property and you use the other spouse's income and credit, and it becomes joint property, okay? So you can't have it both ways. That expression is so very true, okay? But we'll deal with that down the road when we deal with divorces and in detail and legal separations, okay? But for this prenup, we have to engage in total honesty,
Right.
right? And what can happen?
Non-disclosure.
Yeah.
You say that you have some money in the bank here or wherever, but you don't disclose the fact that you've got a closet full of stocks and bonds.
Right.
You know?
Hello. It can be either voidable or void, okay? So failure to disclose. So don't say, oh, I forgot my grandma's 600 acres of 600 acres, folks. You can't usually forget that. I mean, and I've had people say some really ridiculous things like that. Really? Okay. And then your jaws get tight because the judge says this is not
marital property.
right.
Or this is marital property.
This is marital property, yeah. And or that your failure to disclose makes your agreement either voidable as to this section or avoid, depending on the jurisdiction where you are. They can be very, very nasty. Yeah.
And couples have to be careful when they're making these verbal agreements with
Oh,
each other.
yeah. Yeah. We
Well,
had
he
an
told me-
understanding.
yeah. He told me if I quit my job and take care of the kids, X, Y, and Z. No, if
Folks,
it's not on paper, forget about it.
and I know in the African, and look, we have a mixed audience. My family is multiracial, and many of them are listening across the country. Okay, so, but in the African American tradition, we have that oral tradition. Okay, it doesn't work at the courthouse. Okay, now, oh, I'm not saying it to be cute or funny. I cannot take that oral tradition down into
It's
that
true.
courthouse.
It's absolutely true.
How many of people get mad at us when
Mhm.
we lose because
Yeah.
Yeah.
What he said, what she said.
yeah. And down the road we're going to talk about child support. People say, well, we had an understanding.
Mhm.
That court doesn't care a bit about your understanding on child support and other things. And they don't care about that. In fact, when you get into the court and you say things like that, you know what the judge does to Miss Don and Miss Gwen? Approach the bench, please. I don't like to approach the bench, folks. So get it straight.
Nobody likes that.
Nobody likes that. Okay. They put the little muffler on, but you can tell from the judge's expression that
Getting
it's,
reamed out.
yeah, I'm getting taken to the woodshed. I don't like it. Okay. Don't make me have to charge a nuisance fee. Okay. So because that is really not a great feeling. So we have to be totally honest about what we own and how we want to dispose of it. Anything else do you think of?
I'm just looking at here about creditors seizing property
Oh,
in
not
the
good.
absence of a prenup.
Mhm.
Um, Just so much can happen. The debt, someone is hospitalized and they eventually pass.
Mhm.
There's no prenuptial agreement, and suddenly the grieving spouse is getting bills from the hospitals and from the doctors. Having a prenuptial agreement can prevent that from happening.
Exactly.
And it has to be a valid prenuptial agreement, so you might want
Right.
to speak a little bit about that.
Right. It has to be valid. And look, you know what can really kill a prenuptial agreement is if it was done on the way to the wedding.
Right, in the hallway. On
In the
way to
hallway.
reception.
Because reasonable time to study it, to go over every paragraph. Okay. Now, let's lock in on this. It cannot be done under coercion or duress. Okay. This occurs many times when, not always, Gwen, but in my study and in my experience, when one party has significantly more
Mhm.
than the other party in terms of things.
Mhm.
I don't mean because, character or anything. I mean things and finance. And I can remember a case that someone called me to run past me, because if you're in a situation where you're facing that and you're trying to draft something, it's good to run it by another colleague, like, what do you think? Do you think this language is tight? And that's the usual situation when one potential spouse, future spouse, has considerably more than the other. And that's what makes these celebrities come
Right.
up, because many times one is on, what do the kids call it, on the come up, Okay, I just want y'all to know Miss Dawn knows that lingo now.
Retainer.
On the come up, yeah, right. On the come up. But the language, then that person who has can exert
Mhm.
covertly or overtly some influence over that other person.
And then depending on the person's age, the parents could be back there,
Right.
saying, you need a prenup.
Yeah.
You know.
Because the parents have a little interest in what,
right.
and
That's
this, especially if it's somebody who's doing very well.
Mhm.
I think of the athletes.
Mhm.
and people in the entertainment industry,
Yeah.
which at this professional sports is a part of that complex. And so, yeah, parents can have a vested interest.
Everybody's a gold digger.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, parents can be really bad at it.
Right.
But that's what happens now. We have some horrific divorce cases where I can't remember. Did Blige have a prenup?
She had a prenup, but he signed it 2 days before the wedding.
Yeah, Mary J.
And so
Blige.
he just claimed he didn't know what he was signing, and he was golden after that.
All right, right. And the tragedy in that situation was he was not just her husband, he was something he would work for.
Mhm.
He was her manager. And now, what really, my mind went back to something the late, great Billy Eckstine said about so-called managers. He was talking about some of the great songbirds of his era who I think sometimes they wanted their husbands to feel involved in their careers, or they didn't want them to be Mr. whatever her last name was. I won't call any names, but I was thinking of 2 or 3 of them Billy Eckstine had a personal hand in. And he said they called themselves managers. He said, but I called them damagers because they just attempted to wreck their careers, being in control was, really not pleasant. It was bordered on abuse. And some of them were abusers, yeah. So in this case, I remember in the Mary J. Blige case, he wanted to say that she had been cruel to a point that, he experienced anxiety and had to be hospitalized or something like that. But the thing that really struck me was, and for a while she paid what, about $30,000 a month?
$30,000, yeah.
Alimony. Okay. Now, I imagine he had some times when he made $30,000 a year and considered himself balling, but I won't leave it alone. Now, he wanted her to pay some money for his parents, caring for his parents. Yeah. And that's when I said, okay, I really see it now. Yeah, he said they had become accustomed to a certain lifestyle. Well, now his parents
Yeah.
were of a certain age, and how long? Well, she wasn't married to him that long, I mean, it was about 12 years, or I don't even know if it was that long. But his parents were of a certain age, and I'm sure they had not forgotten how to be average. I mean, they had, or whatever it was they were before, but they weren't her managers,
And despite the fact that she had built all this before her marriage, it
Right.
didn't matter in
right?
the absence of a binding or
A
legitimate
binding,
or
yeah.
prenuptial agreement.
And I think that he was crafty enough to drag it out and not sign it. I've had it both ways. I've had the ones who need, there was a party who refused to sign it, like the lesser party, if you will, not wanting to sign that agreement. But here's the thing, and don't ever forget this. The prenuptial agreement should always contain language that says both parties have had the benefit of counsel. Independent counsel, not the same lawyer, right?
That's right.
So in mine, I'll say that this was drafted by counsel for either the husband or the wife, and that the other party has been advised to get legal counsel to review this. At the signing of that, if it's possible, you can even have both counsel there.
Mhm.
And if not, I will ask the other party, did you have your lawyer look at this? Did you go over this with your lawyer? And if they said, oh, I had somebody look at it, I really want to know who that was. I would really like to know who that was. But I will reduce it to writing, memo or letter. They were asked, did you let your own lawyer look at this or whatever? And they receive it. Please initial my copy. You received this letter. So if I have to hear about this later, we can say that person was told to get his or her own lawyer. I mean, you cannot, and look, don't stay up late at night. You know how you do with the little do-it-yourself wills? Well, don't stay up, do-it-yourself prenup agreements because you may get into a bind, you know. I know we do a lot of do-it-yourself now. Did you stumble across anything with that in mind?
Not in, well, do it yourself. I've had do it yourself wills that weren't worth the paper they were written on.
The
And,
995 jobs.
you know,
Yeah.
after the person's deceased, it's just too late to get upset
Mhm.
over the fact that you don't have a valid will.
And definitely a prenup. I know attorneys who call other attorneys to get advice or just refer
Mhm.
the client to someone who is really skilled in
Right, and that's what I wondered about
Mhm.
in Mary J. Blige's case.
Yeah.
Should not her attorney have known, assuming she had an attorney?
Well, I would say she had one, and you would think probably one highly skilled in entertainment law.
Okay, so, yeah.
So let's be clear,
Mhm.
if you're representing an entertainer, if you don't do it yourself, family law, you usually have somebody in your orbit.
That's important to,
Yeah,
have somebody who is an expert in that particular
In that
field to
particular
take care of that matter.
exactly, because how many entertainers get divorced? I mean, they have kind of a high rate of
Mhm.
flunking that test.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So, yeah, and you have, look, a family law attorney is what you need, not a criminal lawyer, a family, because I tell you, if you don't get the right lawyer, somebody might commit a crime and need a criminal lawyer.
That's true. Have mercy.
Okay, but protect yourself. And there was something else about this prenup. Keep it in a safe place.
Okay.
Okay, have it properly notarized and witnessed, and keep it in a safe place. But it's not just for rich people.
Right.
It's for smart people. It is for smart people. Can you think of anything
I
else?
came across something about Hello Prenup.
Mhm.
It's a company that will sell you a prenuptial agreement, I think, for $600. They appeared apparently on the Shark Tank show.
Oh.
But it's important to even know that if you have one of those, get a lawyer
To look at it.
because, it's in your best interest.
Yeah.
Is do it yourself is not the best way to go in anything that involves the law and you.
Right. And especially something as important as marriage, right? Okay. It's not, I think it's part of the vows in the traditional vows, it's not to be entered into lightly
Or unadvisedly.
or
The operative
unadvisedly.
word being advice.
You see what I'm saying to you? I just want you all to know we're not heathens. We've been to church now.
Amen.
Okay. And we don't just go. We really are people of faith. And though, see, when you listen to the vows, see, it's nothing. And they even ask, anybody here know of a reason why? No. And Lord, now do they do that at African American weddings now?
I don't think if anybody objects, they won't stand a chance of getting out alive.
I'm just, I can't remember hearing it lately, but I was just wondering.
I don't know.
I'm not sure. But but I was thinking of protecting children's rights, especially if, let's say, there have been two marriages. I've been married, he's been married. He has children, I have children. Then we decide to live. Let's look at this. I don't want to move too fast, but let's look at this. If we each have children and we decide to live in my house,
Okay.
and then I die,
Mhm.
then all that needs to be addressed. He may want to stay in my house.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, and I don't want my children over there putting my husband out,
I do know of a case like that.
Yeah.
I do know of a case like that where The young lady was living at home,
Mhm.
caring for her father, who was ill, cared for him for years.
Mhm.
Before that, he had married again, and so that was her stepmother.
Mhm.
When he died, the stepmother put her out, and she had no inheritance because he died without a will, intestate.
Mm. Now, was that his house?
That was his house.
Okay, and he died without a will.
Hmm.
And if he died without a will and he had this child, had he changed the house to joint names with the widow?
That's something that I don't know. What
Okay,
I do
because it
know
sounds
is
like that may have
she
happened.
put him out. She put her out of the house.
Yeah, because if he died without a will, the child did have some interest, probably. Don't know the jurisdiction or where it happened, but um, sometimes to keep the peace, you just go along with whatever and you hope, you know. But it sounds like what he may have done, and I have advised people to think about this, is put the name of the new spouse on the house. And if that's the case, as soon as he drew his last breath, it belonged to that spouse.
Mhm.
Okay? Now, what could happen, and sometimes this can even be done in conjunction with a prenup, is with that spouse, you can give them a life estate.
Mhm.
And we'll talk about that down the road too, how to give a life estate to a surviving spouse or a child with disability, something like that. And we all know, there's so many, this, folks, there's a lot to it. You cannot stay up late at night and look at the do-it-yourself forms, $9.95 a pack. I mean, you just can't do it. I mean, well, you can do it,
Mhm.
but then you know who's going to be happy? Miss Gwen and Miss Dawn, because you're going to need a lawyer when it doesn't work out. Okay, so just think about that, and I think we'll take just a quick break, and the next topic, common law marriage. Okay, you're not going to want to miss this. Common law marriage. No, it's not just shacking. Talk to you soon. Well, we're back. Yes, we're going to talk about common law marriage. But before we get started, I need to do a shout out to a special person who's helped us uh, in creating this program and making it possible, and that's Mr. Anthony McDuffie. Anthony is now a real estate broker in Washington, D.C. He is the head of Real Estate Wealth Investors, Real Estate Wealth Investors, and he does teaching every Tuesday. If you want to be a part of either his teaching or get some of his services, which include, but not, their services are not limited to listing and selling property and creative financing, call him at 202-491-0404, 202-491-0404. Ask for Anthony McDuffie and tell him Miss Dawn and Miss Gwen said call. All right, Anthony McDuffie, he's located on the corner of Martin Luther King and Talbot Southeast. Okay, thank you, Anthony. Well, common law marriage. Common law marriage. It is a legal marriage in the District of Columbia and some other places. Is that right, Ms. Gwen?
That's correct.
How many places have it now?
Right now, there are 8 states in the district that have it.
8 states and the District of Columbia have common law marriage as a legal marriage construct in this
Yes.
country. All right, at one time there were many states, but it's been phased out over the years. What is a common law marriage, Miss Gwen?
A couple expresses a mutual agreement to be married to each other in the present tense, and they cohabitate.
All right,
They hold themselves out to be married.
okay. So they hold themselves out to the community
Mhm.
to be married.
Yes.
Mr. and Mrs., Miss and Miss,
Mhm.
Mr. and Mr. I mean, we have all forms of marriages now. So holding out in the community as husband and wife, cohabitating, present tense, intent to be married. And, I'm thinking of another term, and that's shacking.
Yes.
Now, is shacking the same as common law marriage? Now, let's get this clip, folks. You know, Miss Don, like the Apostle Paul said, I would not have you ignorant about these things. I want y'all to know I'm not a heathen. I know about a little bit about that Bible. Okay, so we don't want you to be ignorant, because what do I always say? Ignorance is not cheap and it's not bliss. So shacking,
Shacking is different.
yeah.
You're just living together.
Mm-hmm.
You may be friends with benefits, but
Yeah.
everybody knows you're not married.
And we know what those
Because-
benefits are, don't we?
Because everybody knows you're not married, you're just living together.
Okay, so they think of you as shacking. Now, one of the important aspects of understanding the formation of a common law marriage is, yes, you do all those things Miss Gwen said. You hold yourself out in the community as husband and wife, okay, and so forth. But each person must be free to marry. Okay, do you have that? Because here's what I hear people especially in the district area say. He left his wife. Now he's living over there with his common law wife.
No.
Not possible, right?
No.
Okay. Because there's an impediment. This person is legally married to someone else. And so if he goes over here, if you leave Macy to go live with Tracy, okay, you're shacking with Tracy. Okay. All right. Somebody's a shacker and shacky over here.
Regardless of how you hold yourself out, it's
right.
a marriage that is not legitimate. It's not a legal marriage.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, those elements of the common law marriage, hold yourself out in the community as husband and wife. Be free to be married. Okay. Present tense intent. Okay. Cohabitation. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later, the cohabitation part. But when those things are present, we're talking about the proper formation of a common law marriage. What's the history of common law marriage? Sometimes when people don't know the history of something, they.
Yeah, it was a construct that was brought over to the colonies by England.
Okay.
And being the kind of a country that we were, people were out in the prairie, miles and miles away from the preacher, or no place to get a marriage license. And so in order to have children and be acceptable to the community, they engaged in what was common law marriage.
Right.
And the law recognized them as being married.
Right. Because they held themselves out in that community. That's that holding out part that was established out on the prairies and the plains when there were circuit preachers coming, but you didn't know when this preacher was coming. And even the law enforcement was circuit. There were circuit marshals and circuit constables, or whatever they called those people, sheriffs and so forth, coming through, but not on a regular basis, and people lived miles and miles apart. Okay, so that was a matter of convenience then.
Yes.
Okay, and people wanted to do the right thing, so they recorded in their Bibles, people, when they began this marriage. So there was an honorable aspect to what they were trying to do. And I'm just saying Bibles, but whatever faith they had, or they did something to commemorate when they were starting that without a formal license. Okay, so we kept the concept, and I think at one time we had as many as about 28 states that had common law marriage, and then over time it was phased out in many states, and now it's just in 8 states plus the District of Columbia. With those states, in terms of the holding out, as I recall, but help me here, there would be a time element for people, like maybe 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, depended on what jurisdiction you were in.
Right, it
you know.
depended on the jurisdiction, whether there was a time limit on when you could consider yourself married.
Exactly, exactly, and so it was important to meet that
Right.
time requirement, okay? And so, but the bottom line is when rightly formed, when properly
Mhm.
formed, it is a legitimate marriage,
Yes.
okay? Now, what happened over time, and this is important to understand too, is at one time, we had three categories of states. One where you could form the common law marriage, another set of states that you couldn't form it there, but they would recognize it.
Right.
If you proved
Mhm.
you established it somewhere else.
Mhm.
And then you had places like my home state who said, we don't care where you formed it. When you come up in here, it's a no.
Right.
And but of course, it's different now because of the
Full faith.
full faith and credit. They were forced, but West Virginia was hard line about
Yeah, I
that.
can believe it.
Oh, yeah. You said you can believe it? Now, do
Yeah,
I?
you came from there, so.
Oh, because I came from there. Yeah, okay. And I come from a place called the tri-state area. The tri-state area. And that's where Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia come together, kind of like this DMV thing. And Ohio, when I was a little girl, had it. They only phased out common law marriage in 1991. Okay, so it's fairly recent. And what would happen is my dad was from the Ohio side of the bridge. My mom was from the West Virginia side. Well, I grew up in West Virginia. You see who won that battle, don't you? Okay, so uh, over there, they had common law marriage. But if the people, this is when I was a little girl, before the forcing them to recognize it, if they moved to West Virginia, they had to get married.
Mhm.
And in many southern states, marriage applications, the application was published in the newspaper. So sometimes people say, I thought they were already married. But if they
Exactly.
moved over to West
Mhm.
Virginia, they had to. And where we lived, they published the West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky, right in that area, because it was a small area, that kind of thing. So um, we have to recognize how to form it in these 8 states plus the District of Columbia. And in the District of Columbia, we have just what you talked about, holding yourself out in the community, mutual agreement
Mhm.
to be married, cohabitation. Now, here's the part I want everybody to understand. All those things you heard about, but I just asked Miss Gwen a question about time. The District of Columbia does not have a set time. You can do it in a day.
Mhm.
Hello. Yeah, I know some of you. Okay, help him up. Okay, help
He's
her.
married now.
So, he's married now. Yeah, you're sitting there. Yeah, you. I know you got my email in the opening, and we'll put it up at the end. Yeah. So be very careful. The district, when I moved here for college, when I heard people talk about play sister, play brother,
Mhm.
and that, I had never heard that before.
Mhm.
Never. And I tell people, well, you better be careful how you play. You just, oh, this is my wife or this is my husband. You know what I mean? You hold yourself out like that in the community. Uh, conceivably, you could get uh, married.
And it becomes a
Right.
problem
Yeah.
when one of the partners decide they want to move on.
Yeah, yeah.
That's when it becomes a problem.
Now, this hold on to your seats, hold on to your significant other, or maybe you don't want to hold on to your significant other when I say this. Um, how does one get out of a common law marriage? You must file a divorce. Yes, go to court and file a divorce. Yes, if you have properly established a common law marriage, you must dissolve it by getting a divorce. It's a valid marriage.
Mhm.
All other marriages are how are they dissolved? By divorce, the filing of a divorce. Okay? I mean, that is just real clear. Right?
That's true.
And I want you to know that any children born within a common law marriage are considered legitimate children. Okay, they are legitimate because it is a legitimate marriage. People, it's not shacking when it's legitimately formed. And when we say that, we've done seminars, you've been to some of them, and you've helped me. Look, when we get to that part and we say you have to get a divorce, what? What? Okay, just calm down. You must get a divorce. End of story. Don't feel in your heart. I don't want to hear about it. How you feel in your heart, and the judges don't either. They don't care. All they want to know is, well, how are we going to do this divorce? Uncontested or contested? That's what they want to know. That's what they want to know. So,
And if somebody wants to protest and
Mhm.
say, well, we weren't really ever married,
mhm,
well, yes, you were.
yeah,
And so the spouse that's, leaving or left behind, they're entitled to the spousal share, whatever it is, that they would normally be entitled to if they had the justice of the peace or somebody else to marry them.
exactly. And how the circumstances where this usually becomes a problem is when one dies.
Mhm.
When one of them dies, and the other goes down there to the probate court, and let's say they die without a will.
Mhm.
Let's take that scenario. They die, that common law spouse. I mean, I'll just say spouse because they've established the marriage. They just did it through common law. They die without a will. So the probate lawyer is usually faced with some family members
Mhm.
of the deceased. Okay, they weren't really married, they just
Mhm.
lived together, they never had a wedding, and and all of that. Well, let me give you some strong advice. If they have held themselves out in the community as spouses, all that probate lawyer needs to do is get affidavits from people in the community that they knew them as husband and wife. And that let's say the children went to school
Mhm.
and the school teachers knew them, or they went to church. The church members knew them as husband and wife. You get affidavits from people, that's one part of the proof. Let's say how they filled out their employment
Right.
forms,
Or their tax
their
forms,
tax
their
forms,
bank
their bank
accounts,
accounts, all of that. Now, I'm thinking of a particular case I knew knew something about, or somebody called me for some, just insight. And the wife had included her husband on her pension as a beneficiary
Mhm.
and on the life insurance, and the designation was his name, spouse, because they asked for relationship.
Mhm.
And so I asked my colleague, I said, well, do you need me to give you a little moral support? Because, sometimes people, Miss Don gets called on to be moral support for people, You know what that means, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Help me.
Yeah, yeah. That means yard dog.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll go in there and I've been called to even funeral homes when this comes up. You know what I mean? And I go over there and try to straighten the people out, and tell them, look, it looks like this is really legit. So, in addition to those affidavits, you get those forms like that. One of my colleagues used a bill from a veterinarian. It said Mr. and Mrs. So and so, and their little Fido belonged to Mr. and Mrs. So and so. And he took that veterinary bill right down at the DC Superior Court.
Mhm.
And that was one item. And everybody in that neighborhood said, oh, they love their little Fido,
Mhm.
and Mr. and Mrs. So and so. And that was strong proof of their relationship.
Mhm.
Now, do you have to use the same name? No, not necessarily, because I know a number of judges right down at the Superior Court, lady judges who don't use their married names. But I'm not saying they're common law, but I mean, it's something that women don't always do anymore, take the name of their husbands. But how they live their lives in the community and they're known socially, that makes a difference, okay? So let's be clear, in DC, there is no time. There is no 7 years, forget it. There is no 6 months. That was another myth. Forget that 6-month thing. You can do it in 6 days. You can do it in 6 minutes or a day. I'm just saying, just for, see, don't spread. I'm like Chief Conti. Let's stop spreading misinformation, because it's costly. Okay, so now, uh, if that's what you're trying to do, by all means, go forth with it. But with this common law marriage, it is real in the District of Columbia. It's real in these states. I can give you some examples of horrific cases. I mean, these are real cases. There was an elderly lady in Southeast. I mean, older, mature woman, not a youngster. She took up with a gentleman. They decided to enter into a common law marriage. So she thought, she had her own home. He stayed with her in the home. I think he lived down the street. And he had a North Carolina route. They decided to go down to North Carolina to live. And while down there, they got some property from his parents. Okay. Now, they stayed down there a while, but then he got wanderlust and he wanted to come back to Washington. Well, he came back to Washington, moved back into their home, their common law spouses, right? Okay. That's the way they presented themselves. But then he started taking up with a lady down the street. Now, follow along with me, people. It's one of those DC stories, so try to follow. Hang on tight, And so suddenly, he figures this is not real, whatever. And of course, this lady was pretty hurt, the person who thought she was common law. And so she said, but we have property, down in North Carolina and whatever. Well, he took the lady down the street down to meet his parents. And I guess, as they say in West Virginia, they took a shine to her, and they liked her, the new lady, and whatever. And they actually got married in a ceremonial wedding in North Carolina. Well, you know what?
Did you say bigamy?
Yeah. At least that's what we thought.
Okay.
That's what we thought. So the lady, the person who thought she was who considered herself common law wife, came to an office of a colleague of mine, and she said, this is what I am having a problem. And when she came, let me tell you what happened. He married that lady, from down the street up here in the window. He dropped dead.
Ooh.
Okay, so
the plot thickens.
The plot thickens. Okay, so this is when the lady came. She said, look, I have this property down there and, so forth and so on. Well, the new wife was pretty confident about her status. And I had to wonder, what's this? So I had to work with counsel down in Carolina. I'm sitting in my office one Saturday. I'm trying to make this short, but so I talked to the lead counsel down there, older gentleman, very nice. He said, okay, Donata, let me look into everything and what's going on. And so on Saturday morning, and I always worked on Saturday mornings, at least till 12 or 1 o'clock at my office, and my phone rings. He had a young associate, and she called and she said, Donata, he said you'd be in there on a Saturday morning. I said, yeah. She said, I have some bad news about our client. I said, really? I said, what? Now, listen carefully to what I'm getting ready to tell you. I'm thinking, and they're thinking down there, that our client, we are in the driver's seat. We had that common law marriage established. But this is what happened. Our client, and I'm saying ours because, I was called in on it, so had been a widow
Oh.
a military person from World War II.
And she was getting his benefit.
And she was getting his benefit.
Oh.
And ever so often they have to recertify.
That they're not remarried.
And here's the thing, that man knew that.
Mm.
And so did his ceremonial bride.
Wow.
They knew that. So she had an impediment that kept her from being a true common law wife.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Busted.
Busted. However, her name was on the property in North Carolina, but it could not be as wife, but she could become tenant in common. So that ended up being a big mess.
Wow.
Okay.
I've
been in
some.
some. Yeah, that was a big mess. So you have to, and I don't think she was a person trying to be slick. She was an older person, and she probably just thought she was entitled to the, but that was an impediment because the recertification talks about remarriage.
So if she could read, then she was checking the wrong box.
Yeah, she was checking the wrong box. Yeah. So, and I felt like there was a little deficit there, in understanding and, whatever. And he enjoyed the benefits of that money every month. But see, he knew about it.
That's why he was able to just go and marry somebody else.
Exactly. And the new wife alluded to that situation. And that's what made the lawyers there in Carolina look into it. Yeah.
Wow.
So, folks, there's a lot to. Yeah. And when we go to get married and when you go apply for a license, I believe there's a question on there. Have you been married before?
Now that's an important question.
And
it's horrible for a spouse to pass away and you find out that he was never divorced.
Yeah.
Or she was never divorced from the first spouse.
And I have encountered that situation. Yes. So now someone who thinks he or she is a surviving spouse is not. So on that same form, if you go the marriage license route, instead of common law, there's a question on this. Have you been married before? When was it dissolved? When did you get your date of divorce or dissolution, and where?
Important to find out.
And it's important if you are marrying somebody who has been divorced or in a relationship, you need to find out where and when the divorce took place.
Whether it's common law or
whether it's common law or a certificate marriage, because, and if they, start tap dancing, you might want to just kind of back up and drop it like it's hot for a minute because, there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
And look, it doesn't call, we live in the age of information.
Oh yeah. It's easy to get married.
We live in
certificate.
Yeah. You can make a certificate, I suppose. I don't know, down in your basement. I don't know. I know some people are illiterate, I'm just saying there's some bad people out here. I have encountered some in 40 years. I'm telling you, in a little over 40 years now, I've encountered some bad stuff, people. So I'm not telling you what I read in a book, saw in the movie, or on TV. I have some files that will make you, make your hair stand up, because look, there are some bad folks out here. See, and when emotions are involved, that can cloud our judgment. When we love someone, you're in love and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Why do we need a piece of paper?
Yeah. Why do we need a piece of paper?
Yeah.
Well, but as I say, to dissolve this, it's no paper in, but paper coming out. That's the way I say it. In the common law marriage, none going in, but paper coming out. And now that was one bad situation. But I remember I wrote an article a few years back about and it was based on an actual case in DC. And so, I'm going to share it with everybody now. I think we have time to do it, don't we? Okay, good. So, I always try to inject a little humor. I did change the names. Okay, so I said, Dr. Jim Feelgood, MD, lived with Joy Healer, RN, through his last 2 years of medical school, internship, and residency. This was from 1988 through 1996. That's 8 years. This was in DC, by the way, people. This was a real case. During that time, they held themselves out to the community as husband and wife, and they had 2 children together. Okay, just like we were talking about. In 1997, Dr. Feelgood moved into an apartment and began a relationship with Money Changer, CPA. After 2 years of dating, they became engaged and planned a lavish wedding at a silk stocking Washington, D.C. church and an elaborate reception at a luxury hotel in D.C. It should be noted that he never stopped supporting his children and their mother during the separation from them. Okay, so he made sure his children were taken care of. The happy couple mailed out their wedding invitations on October 15th, 1999 for their November 20th nuptials. On October 30th, Nurse Healer served divorce papers on Dr. Feelgood. Needless to say, Dr. Feelgood and Miss Changer were stunned, as they thought they were free to marry. After the initial consultation and review of the divorce complaint, counsel for Dr. Feelgood delivered some really bad news. It was his opinion that a common law marriage most likely had been established pursuant to DC law. Accordingly, no marriage could take place until after the divorce proceeding. Okay, now what? The invitations were out, plans in place. So what they did, and this really happened, okay? They went forth with the celebration that night. I can't remember exactly what they called it. It was a nice celebration, but and then they had a party instead of a reception. They just kept all the plans in place and went forth, had a really nice time and whatever. There was a wedding, but not a marriage. You understand the difference, folks? There was a wedding, there was a ceremony, but not a marriage, okay? The divorce proceeding took place. During the trial, the court determined a divorce action was proper because a common law marriage had been established pursuant to DC law. Mhm. After the divorce and running of the interlocutory period, it was 30 days, Dr. Feelgood and Miss Changer were legally married in a civil ceremony at the courthouse. Okay? His first wife had some really good legal counsel. She established her rights and those of her children. She did get alimony again and something against his future earnings and child support. Okay? So there you go. That common law marriage, even his own attorney knew a common law marriage had been established. He didn't protest. Yeah, he didn't protest. His own lawyer told him, So, folks, people talk about having your cake and eating it too. Well, Dr. Feelgood didn't get to do that. Dr. Feelgood felt bad.
And rightfully so.
But the brilliance of the timing of filing that divorce was just, strategy is so important in legal action, and So, I mean, the lady didn't hesitate, and whatever. And
Sounds like it might have been a little payback in
yeah,
there too.
yeah.
The timing.
Well, you know what? James Brown had that song called "The Big Payback." I think that was James Brown. Anyway, but there is a song called "The Big Payback." Y'all get those little $2,000 phones out and look it up. I might be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think I got that right. Yeah. And so, and problems often arise when one of the parties dies. And something very akin to this, I heard from one of my colleagues recently. A lady had gone through a ceremonial marriage, evidently, and was living with her spouse. And we're going to talk about this down the road. I just want to introduce people to some things that we're going to talk about in the future. And this lady cared for her husband, was attentive and faithful. And I think he became ill, very ill, and and she took care of him. Bedpan duty, the whole bit, and she left her job, or maybe she was on an extended leave, and he passed away. Well, he had adult children, with the first wife and so forth. Well, the lady, after being with him a number of years, I don't mean just a short time, a number of years, and faithful and took her vows seriously, she finds out he never divorced his first wife. And his daughter knew that all along, and went down to apply to be the personal representative of the estate. And that's when this lady found out she was not married to this man.
Her marriage was void.
Her marriage was void. And she went through the application process. She really thought they were married, and he never said a word all that time. We can be, I just don't know why people are so cruel. You're doing wrong. You're taking advantage of a really good person, who's trying to do the right thing and be faithful and caring. And this lady, now, you said, boy, the lady was just out the door. Well, if you find yourself in that situation, people, and that she wasn't the first and she won't be the last. There's some people out there now knowing they've done wrong and they did get that divorce. Well, here's what I want to let you know. You are taking care of somebody and you're not sure, you go find that decree. But here's what I want you to know. If you find yourself in that position, you go right down to the probate court, wherever it is, and you put in a claim against the estate for caretaking services. Okay? Now you figure caretaking 24/7 over a few years' time is going to add up to a pretty good piece of change, as they say down the way, So you get yourself a lawyer and you file yourself a claim against that estate. Okay, now we're pulling into something else we'll talk about down the road. But you see how all these things dovetail together? You see? All right. Now, you heard us talk about why common law marriage was popular back in the early establishment of this country, on the plains and the prairies. It was necessary. But now, come on now. I live in Southeast and the District of Columbia is only so big. I don't have a reason not to go get a license to get married. Okay? Do you know that to go fishing, some places you need a day license just to fish at a fishing hole for one day? Well, I'm way more important than a fish. So I'm just saying, we don't have a reason.
Right. And if you think you're in a common law marriage or somebody doesn't want to get a license, check and see if they've been married before and if they're still married.
And still married. Exactly right. I know of a horrific case. Again, and people, please, if you're from North Carolina, I'm not picking on you, but so many Black people in Washington have a Carolina root. I don't know if they just came straight up, that migration, like the Delta people went up to Chicago and Detroit. I think that's part of it.
Progression.
Yeah, that's part of it. And some ended up in Philly if they went a little further. But anyway, there was a lady in North Carolina, on the coastal part of North Carolina, who married a minister.
Mm.
And together, and he had been married before, and she knew that, and he had adult children, I mean, he had children. I forget how, she'd been married to him a good little while. But anyway, he died. His children came up for the funeral. Nothing said, and this lady had accumulated a store and a house with this man. Well, and he's a well-known minister all over North Carolina. Anyway, when she died, her brother was there taking care of her, and he had a horrific experience with because she never had children with the husband, but the husband's children came up, and also their mother. And what was discovered was the minister had never gotten a divorce.
Hmm.
And so there was, this gentleman who was taking care of his sister, thinking, and he had high regard for his brother-in-law. He was just well-respected preacher. Lord, he did revivals all over, and I mean, just well-known. And he was blind. So he was known as the blind preacher, Well, justice is supposed to be blind too.
Mm.
And so the case turned out that, yes, the second wife did get something because her name was on the property, but not as a spouse. Yeah, not as a spouse.
That's terrible.
But you see what they did that was so cagey, and the strategy, I saw the strategy immediately. You see, they didn't raise it when he died, and he
Right.
died first.
Mhm.
They waited until it would be extremely difficult
Mhm.
to raise a lot of ruckus about, So there was a settlement, but I was so disgusted because I had met that man, and he seemed to be, whatever. But there was a renowned preacher, so it matters not what the titles are, people, because we get hung up on those things and whatever. I was just disgusted with that, and so this is heavy duty stuff, and I hope everybody has taken in the importance of knowing what you're getting into. The marriage vows are important. Uh, Knowing how you form a common law marriage is very important. Knowing your rights, and if you have formed that, stand your ground, get the right legal counsel to help you. I mean,
And don't feel like, you're being paranoid
No.
because you want to have documentation.
I know of one case I was asked to help on, and the gentleman knew he was on this lady's life insurance designation in the government. He knew he was on the pension. She even put him on the health insurance. He had health coverage because of her. She had him help her refinance her own home. Okay, all of that. But what he did that was a little slick was he had an aunt with a house nearby, and some of his paperwork had that address on it, So in a deposition, and I know it was a brutal deposition, how do we prove common law marriage? Well, this lady had about 50 to 75 greeting cards, all addressed to her as his lovely wife, his beautiful wife, his faithful wife, his devoted wife, his longtime wife. He had all of these. And I told that lawyer, you pull every one of them out of the bag. I don't care how long it takes you, and make him read it and make him say that's his signature on those greeting cards. Well, of course, he was madder than a wet hen, but who cared,
Right.
But See, he wasn't anticipating that. So you can be too cute by half, You can be too cute and too smart, sitting up. And he considered himself one of those do-it-yourself smart people, And well, when that lawyer started pulling those cards out that bag one by one, and I mean, every one of them had the word wife on it. Okay,
That's the proof.
yeah. And I mean, you could see the steam coming out his ears, she said. Yeah. And look, got affidavits from the school. Everybody knew him and this lady as the parents of two children.
Mhm.
Even knew him as the parent of her child by a previous relationship. And was active at the school, in the programs that were put on at the school. And I mean, just everything. But he found somebody else, what they say about Baskin Robbins has all those flavors. He found another flavor, I guess. And he, just thought he could just
Walk away.
walk away, But there was all this documentary evidence, And of course, the woman was devastated. And I told my colleague, I said, just burn it down, burn all that down, and he's going to have to pay. And she was, I do believe, she was free to marry, and he was not married before. So there was no impediment there. And then this lady had put him on the man had health insurance because of her.
Right.
And when it wasn't just his name on the form, to the right it says relationship, and the word spouse is there.
Mm-hmm.
How clear is that? He said, well, he didn't mean for it to be. Well,
the courts would decide otherwise.
yeah.
Your intentions don't
Yeah.
mean a whole lot when it comes to the courtroom.
Yeah, but he was one of those people who thought you just pack up and leave. And even the children knew better, even those adults, because they had become adults, the top three, But they had been in the neighborhood so long, some of the teachers were still at the school. The school still remembered them. You see, that's how long they had, pillars of the community. And when I found out about those 75 greeting cards with wife on every one of them, I said, oh, Lord, this man just needs to. What did Kenny Ryder say? Know when to hold, know when to fold. You know what I mean? And he should have just folded like a cheap suit, because that was just so clear. So clear, Yeah. But, so anyway, folks, common law marriage. Now, you say, what are those ladies going to talk about next week? Well, it's going to be equally juicy. Paternity. And I promise I will not have Maury Povich here. I will not have Maury Povich here. No. Paternity, support, and custody. How to do a custody case. And this is very important because we have in DC not just custody between a father and mother, we have third-party custody as well. And we want you to know how to establish that. Now, if you know some grandparent who's trying to get custody, this would be a good show for them to watch, okay, or listen to, because we need them to know what their rights are with respect to the grandchildren. We do have a drug problem again in the district. We have grandparents who need to get custody of the grandchildren, and they need to know what, or an aunt, or somebody, and they need to know what they need to present to the court to get that custody. Okay, am I clear? So make sure you get those people to tune in. This gets very sticky when public assistance is involved.
Right, because the parent may want to hold on to that check.
Yeah.
It may not want to give the child up, even though it's in the child's best interest.
Right. And the grandparents sometimes in the past have allowed that person to keep the check and just
Mhm.
take the child.
Mhm.
But understand, you can't even get the child enrolled in school if you don't have a court order, if you're not legally bound to do those kinds of things. Can't take the child to the doctor. I mean, they're just, it's not like when I came along. My grandma could take me and everybody knew Miss Edwards, and this is her little granddaughter. No, that's not the way it goes now. And it's understandable. We do need to be more formal in our dealings. But with respect to what we talked about today, if you think you're in a common law marriage, you can reach out and I will be glad to refer you to legal counsel to help you and any other things, Gwen, that you can think of that we do.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot.
Prenuptial agreement, you're thinking about getting married, you own your own property, he may or may not own property, uh, you know, and remember what I said, the Brady Bunch was a sitcom, okay? It was a sitcom, people. It looked nice and all of that, but in the realities of things, and usually when things break down, and there are beautiful blended families, please don't get me wrong, that I know some, but what happens when one of the major players passes away? The dynamics of that whole situation change. And that's when, we find out true colors. Okay? True colors come out at that point. I've been summoned to funeral homes to explain it to people because, the fights usually break out, over there. It's amazing. It's amazing. Uh, it's probate work is hard. Estate work is hard because you're trying to apply law to feelings,
Mhm.
and it's very hard. So I can say that, yeah, if you feel you're in a common law marriage, get legal help. And you think some things, you think the relationship is maybe fraying or something, don't wait too late. Get help right now, right now. Or if you're sitting there and let's say the person has passed away and you're like, don't get caught up in the paralysis of analysis. Get help. Okay? Well, I'm glad that you tuned in today. And you know what we're going to talk about next week. Don't forget to give Anthony McDuffie a call if you need some help navigating real estate, if you want to purchase, sell, or maybe you want to become a real estate professional or a real estate investor. Anthony McDuffie, 202-491-0404. He's in DC. He's now a licensed broker in DC. So we thank you for tuning in and we'll see you next week. And don't forget the community code and thou shalt not kill. Thank you.